The morning sky over the Persian Gulf stretched like burnished steel, unmarked except for the contrails of four F-18E Super Hornets cutting through 35,000 feet of crystalline air. Lieutenant Commander Cassandra Blackbird Thorne adjusted her oxygen mask and scanned her instruments with the mechanical precision of someone who had done this dance 1,000 times before. The Hornet's twin engines hummed their familiar song beneath her, a sound that had become as natural as her own heartbeat over 8 years of naval aviation. What should have been a routine combat air patrol had taken an unexpected turn 20 minutes ago when radar picked up an unidentified aircraft approaching from Iranian airspace. The bogey was flying erratically, altitude fluctuating between 12 and 15,000 feet, speed inconsistent. Standard intercept protocols were in effect, but something felt different about this one. Thorne couldn't shake the feeling that crawled up her spine like ice water. Viper 1-1, this is Hawkeye, crackled the voice of the E-2C Hawkeye controller through her headset. Bogey bearing 045, range 50 nautical miles and closing. Profile suggests single-engine fighter aircraft. Rules of engagement are weapons tight until further notice. Copy Hawkeye. Viper 1-1 has the picture. Thorne's voice carried the calm authority that had earned her the respect of her squadron, though she knew some of the younger pilots still whispered about the woman who flew with ghosts. They didn't understand that the shadows following her weren't supernatural. They were memories of friends who hadn't made it home from missions just like this one. Her wingman, Lieutenant Jake "Razor" Morrison, pulled his Hornet into a loose deuce formation off her right wing. Behind them, the second element maintained overwatch position, their aircraft gleaming like predatory birds against the azure backdrop. The four Super Hornets represented over $200 million of American engineering and firepower, each pilot hand-picked from thousands of applicants, each machine capable of delivering death with surgical precision. But as they closed distance on the unknown aircraft, Thorne noticed something that made her blood run cold. The bogey's flight pattern wasn't random. It was following a specific sequence. A sequence she recognized from survival school, from combat search and rescue training, from the nightmares that sometimes woke her at 3 in the morning. The aircraft was broadcasting a distress pattern older than most of the pilots flying today, a code that meant only one thing: American aircrew in trouble, requesting immediate assistance. The question that would haunt the next 49 minutes was simple. How could an Iranian fighter be broadcasting an American rescue code? The sky above the Persian Gulf had witnessed countless encounters between opposing forces, but what was about to unfold would challenge everything these pilots thought they knew about warfare, loyalty, and the invisible threads that connect warriors across enemy lines. In the cockpit of Viper 1-1, Cassandra Thorne was about to discover that some battles aren't fought with missiles and guns, but with the courage to see beyond the uniform of an enemy and recognize the universal language of desperation. The twin Pratt and Whitney F-414 engines continued their steady burn as four American fighters closed on what appeared to be certain combat. None of them could have predicted that in less than an hour, the pilot they were prepared to engage would change their understanding of heroism forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across the water below, and somewhere in the distance, a lone aircraft struggled to stay airborne, carrying secrets that would soon explode across the consciousness of everyone involved. What started as a potential shoot-down was about to become something far more complex, far more human, and infinitely more dangerous for everyone involved. Thorne's gloved hand rested on the stick with practiced ease, her eyes moving between the heads-up display and the endless blue horizon ahead. She had no way of knowing that the next decision she made would not only save lives, but would ultimately cost her everything she had worked for. The Persian Gulf stretched beneath them like a mirror reflecting the morning sky, beautiful and deceptive in its calm. Storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, both meteorological and metaphorical, and the four Super Hornets flew steadily toward a confrontation that would test every principle they had sworn to uphold. In the distance, barely visible even to their sophisticated radar systems, the unknown aircraft continued its desperate pattern, broadcasting a code that hadn't been used in anger for over a decade. The pilot flying that distant machine was running out of time, fuel, and options. But he was also carrying information that certain people would kill to protect, and others would die to reveal. The morning that had started with routine paperwork and pre-flight inspections was about to become a defining moment in the careers of four American naval aviators. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge everything they believed about duty, honor, and the true meaning of service above self. Thorne checked her weapon systems one final time, unaware that she was about to make a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life, not because it was wrong, but because it was right in ways that the military justice system would never understand. The morning sky stretched endlessly ahead, holding secrets that were about to be revealed in the most dangerous way possible. 23 minutes remained until the moment that would change everything. The countdown had already begun, measured not in seconds but in heartbeats, in radio transmissions, in the distance between aircraft closing at a combined speed of over 1,000 miles per hour. The Persian Gulf had seen many battles, but none quite like the one that was about to unfold 35,000 feet above its peaceful surface. The F-18E Super Hornet is a marvel of modern engineering, capable of engaging targets on land, sea, and air with equal effectiveness. Its pilot must possess reflexes, intelligence, and judgment honed through years of intensive training. But sometimes, the most important quality a pilot can possess is the ability to see beyond the tactical situation and recognize the human element that no amount of technology can quantify. Lieutenant Commander Cassandra Thorne was about to discover that the greatest victories sometimes require the courage to question orders, even when those orders come from the highest levels of command. The morning sun climbed higher into the Persian Gulf sky, casting everything in sharp relief. 4 American fighters continued their intercept course, closing on what appeared to be an enemy aircraft. None of them suspected that they were actually racing toward one of the most significant moral challenges any of them would ever face. The blue expanse below reflected the sky above like a vast mirror, creating the illusion that they were flying through infinite space, suspended between two worlds. In 18 minutes, everything would change. The only question was whether they would be ready for what they discovered. The tactical situation seemed straightforward. Unidentified aircraft penetrating controlled airspace, origin Iranian, potential threat level unknown. Standard operating procedures called for visual identification, radio contact attempts, and escalating response measures if the aircraft proved hostile. But the book had never anticipated a scenario like the one developing in the skies above the Persian Gulf. The book had never imagined an American pilot would have to choose between following orders and following conscience at 35,000 feet. Thorne's breathing was steady and controlled, her heart rate slightly elevated but well within normal parameters for combat operations. She had flown similar missions dozens of times, had engaged enemy aircraft in combat, had made life-and-death decisions in split seconds. But something about this morning felt different, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. The air itself seemed to carry electricity, as if the atmosphere was building toward something unprecedented. 15 minutes to contact. The unknown aircraft continued its erratic flight pattern, the distress code repeating in a sequence that grew more desperate with each iteration. Somewhere below, ships moved across the Gulf like toys on a bathtub, unaware of the drama unfolding in the sky above them. The world continued its normal rotation, but for the pilots involved in this intercept, time seemed to move with crystalline clarity, each second stretching into eternity. The stage was set. The players were in position, and in the next quarter hour, Lieutenant Commander Cassandra Blackbird Thorne would face a choice that would define not only her career, but her understanding of what it truly means to serve with honor. Contact bearing 037, range 35 nautical miles, came the update from Hawkeye. Viper flight, you are cleared to continue intercept. Maintain weapons tight status until visual identification. Thorne acknowledged the transmission with professional calm, but inside her chest, something tightened like a fist. The distress code was becoming clearer now, more distinct, and with growing clarity came the terrible certainty that they were flying toward something that would challenge every assumption they had made about this mission. The morning sky stretched endlessly ahead, beautiful and terrible in its indifference to human conflict. 12 minutes remained until the moment that would change 4 lives forever. The countdown continued, marked by radio calls, instrument checks, and the steady burn of jet engines carrying them toward a truth that none of them were prepared to face. In the distance, barely visible even to their sophisticated sensors, an aircraft struggled to maintain altitude while broadcasting a message that would soon shatter everything they thought they knew about warfare. The Persian Gulf held its secrets close, but some secrets are too powerful to remain hidden. The morning sun climbed higher, casting shadows that pointed toward a confrontation between duty and conscience, between orders and humanity, between the rigid structures of military discipline and the chaotic reality of combat, where the only certainty is uncertainty itself. Lieutenant Commander Thorne adjusted her grip on the stick and prepared for whatever lay ahead, unaware that in 10 minutes she would make a decision that would save lives and destroy her career in equal measure. The morning sky stretched endlessly ahead, holding promises and threats in equal abundance. The intercept continued, 4 American fighters closing on an unknown aircraft, each pilot preparing for combat while hoping for peaceful resolution. None of them could have predicted that the next few minutes would challenge everything they believed about loyalty, duty, and the true meaning of heroism. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo through the halls of the Pentagon and the consciences of everyone involved. 8 minutes to contact. The unknown aircraft signal was becoming clearer, the distress code more distinct with each passing second. Thorne's instruments showed green across the board, her weapons systems armed and ready, her aircraft performing flawlessly. Everything was proceeding according to protocol, following the carefully rehearsed dance of aerial intercept that had been perfected through decades of training and experience. But protocols had never anticipated this scenario. Training had never prepared them for the moment when following orders and saving lives would become mutually exclusive choices. The morning sky stretched ahead like an invitation to infinity, beautiful and terrible in its indifference to human conflict. In 6 minutes, everything would change, and 4 American naval aviators would discover that sometimes the greatest courage requires the willingness to question everything you've been taught to believe. The countdown continued, measured in heartbeats and radio calls, in the distance between aircraft and the growing certainty that nothing about this mission would proceed as planned. The Persian Gulf stretched beneath them like a mirror reflecting the sky, creating the illusion of flying through infinite space, while actually racing toward a collision between duty and conscience that would define them all. Viper 11, contact bearing 035, range 20 nautical miles. You should have visual shortly. The controller's voice carried the routine professionalism of someone who had managed hundreds of such intercepts, unaware that this one would be different from all the others. Thorne acknowledged the transmission while scanning the horizon ahead, searching for the glint of sunlight on metal that would reveal their target. Beside her, her wingman maintained perfect formation, his aircraft a reassuring presence in her peripheral vision. Behind them, the second element followed in disciplined spacing, four professionals executing a textbook intercept against what should have been a routine target. But routine was about to become extraordinary, and textbook solutions were about to prove inadequate for the human complexity of what lay ahead. The morning sky held its secrets close, but some secrets demand to be revealed, no matter the cost to those who uncover them. 3 minutes to visual contact. The distress signal was becoming unmistakable now, clear enough that even the most skeptical pilot would have to acknowledge its authenticity. An American rescue code, broadcast by an aircraft approaching from Iranian airspace, created a paradox that challenged every assumption about the tactical situation. The morning sun climbed higher into the Persian Gulf sky, casting everything in sharp relief, while somehow making the truth more difficult to discern. Lieutenant Commander Cassandra Blackbird Thorne was about to discover that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with the courage to see beyond the enemy's uniform and recognize the universal language of desperation. The countdown continued, each second bringing them closer to a truth that would challenge everything they believed about warfare, loyalty, and the price of doing what's right when what's right contradicts every order you've been given. In 90 seconds, everything would change. The Persian Gulf stretched beneath them like destiny itself, beautiful and terrible and utterly indifferent to the drama about to unfold in the sky above its peaceful surface. Four American fighters continued their approach, professional and disciplined, and completely unprepared for what they were about to discover. The morning sky held its breath, waiting for the moment when training would prove insufficient and conscience would demand choices that no manual had ever anticipated. Contact. Single aircraft bearing 034, range 15 nautical miles. Appears to be Jesus Christ. Morrison's voice cut through the radio chatter, professional composure cracking, as visual contact revealed something none of them had expected. Through the crystal-clear air of the Persian Gulf, the unknown aircraft was finally visible, and what they saw challenged every assumption they had made about this intercept. The aircraft was indeed a fighter, but not Iranian. The distinctive silhouette of an F-16C Fighting Falcon was unmistakable, its single engine trailing a thin stream of white smoke that spoke of mechanical distress. More shocking still was the aircraft's paint scheme, not the olive drab or gray of Iranian Air Force markings, but the distinctive colors of the Iraqi Air Force, complete with roundels that identified it as belonging to a nation that was, at least officially, an American ally. Viper flight, this is Hawkeye. Confirm visual identification of target aircraft. The controller's voice carried a note of tension that suggested the radar operators had noticed the anomaly as well. Thorne keyed her microphone, her voice steady despite the confusion that was rapidly building in her mind. Hawkeye, Viper 11 has visual on what appears to be an Iraqi Air Force F-16C in apparent distress. Aircraft is trailing smoke and maintaining the distress pattern we've been tracking. The silence that followed her transmission lasted only seconds, but felt like minutes. An Iraqi fighter broadcasting American rescue codes while penetrating controlled airspace from Iranian territory created a puzzle that challenged every standard assumption about Middle Eastern politics and military operations. The morning sky that had seemed so clear and predictable suddenly felt charged with dangerous possibilities. Viper 11, attempt radio contact on guard frequency. Iraqi aircraft is not supposed to be in this area. The controller's voice carried the careful neutrality of someone who was already calculating the diplomatic implications of whatever was about to unfold. Thorne switched to the international emergency frequency and keyed her microphone. Unknown aircraft squawking emergency code. This is United States Navy Flight Viper 11. Please identify yourself and state the nature of your emergency. The response came immediately, crackling through static and interference, spoken in heavily accented English that carried the unmistakable sound of desperation. American Navy. This is Iraqi Air Force Colonel Hakim al-Rashid. I am defecting with intelligence about Iranian nuclear program. My aircraft is damaged and I am running out of fuel. I request immediate assistance and safe passage to American-controlled territory. The words hit the 4 American pilots like a physical blow. Defection was complicated enough under the best circumstances, but an Iraqi officer seeking asylum while carrying nuclear intelligence created a situation that was far beyond the scope of a routine combat air patrol. The morning sky that had seemed so peaceful minutes earlier suddenly felt like the center of an international incident that could reshape Middle Eastern politics. Morrison's voice came across the radio, pitched low but clearly audible to the flight. "Boss, we've got a real problem here. This guy claims to have nuclear intel, but how do we know this isn't some kind of Iranian setup? He could be leading us into a trap." The same thought had occurred to Thorne, but as she studied the distant F-16 through her aircraft's targeting system, she noticed details that suggested genuine distress rather than deception. The smoke trail was becoming thicker, the aircraft's flight path more erratic. If this was a trap, the Iraqi pilot was committing to it with remarkable thoroughness, including what appeared to be actual engine damage. Hawkeye, Viper 1-1 requests guidance on this situation. We have a potential defector claiming to carry nuclear intelligence. Aircraft appears to be in genuine distress. Thorne's transmission was carefully neutral, but she could already feel the weight of command responsibility settling on her shoulders. Whatever decision she made in the next few minutes would have consequences far beyond this single intercept. The controller's response carried the tension of someone who was rapidly escalating the situation up the chain of command. Viper 1-1, maintain visual contact, but do not approach within 5 nautical miles. We're contacting higher authority for guidance on this situation. Higher authority. The phrase carried ominous implications for everyone involved. Once this situation reached the Pentagon, the State Department, and potentially the White House, the tactical decisions would become secondary to political considerations that might have little to do with the reality of 4 pilots and 1 defector 35,000 feet above the Persian Gulf. Al-Rashid's voice came across the radio again, more urgent now, tinged with the kind of fear that couldn't be faked. American Navy, my fuel is critical. I have perhaps 10 minutes before I must eject. The intelligence I carry concerns imminent Iranian nuclear test. This information could prevent war, but only if it reaches your government immediately. The word imminent sent a chill through Thorne's bloodstream. Iranian nuclear testing had been a concern for years, but if al-Rashid was telling the truth about an imminent test, the implications were staggering. The intelligence he carried could indeed prevent a war, or it could be misinformation designed to trigger one. The morning sky that had seemed so clear was becoming clouded with possibilities, none of them simple. "Blackbird, what are you thinking?" Morrison's voice carried the trust of a wingman who had flown with her through combat, but also the uncertainty of someone facing a situation that no training had anticipated. Thorne studied the distant F-16, noting the increasing irregularity of its flight path. Whether al-Rashid was a genuine defector or an elaborate deception, his aircraft was clearly in distress. The smoke trail was thickening, and his radio transmissions were becoming more desperate with each passing minute. If he was lying about the nuclear intelligence, he was certainly telling the truth about his fuel situation. "I'm thinking we're about to make a decision that's going to follow us for the rest of our careers," she replied, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had already begun to understand the impossible position they were in. "But first, we need to figure out if this guy is legitimate, or if we're about to become unwitting participants in someone else's intelligence operation." The Persian Gulf stretched beneath them like a vast blue canvas, beautiful and deceptive in its calm. Above them, the morning sky seemed infinite, offering no guidance for the very human problem that was unfolding at 35,000 feet. 4 American pilots and 1 Iraqi defector We're about to discover that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with the courage to make moral choices when those choices carry consequences that extend far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Al-Rashid's aircraft was beginning to lose altitude now, the smoke trail becoming more pronounced with each passing second. Whether he was a genuine defector carrying vital intelligence or an elaborate deception designed to compromise American operations, one thing was becoming increasingly clear. Time was running out for everyone involved. The morning sky held its secrets close, but some secrets demand to be revealed, regardless of the cost to those who uncover them. Lieutenant Commander Cassandra Blackbird Thorne was about to make a decision that would challenge everything she believed about duty, honor, and the price of doing what's right when what's right might be exactly what her enemies wanted her to do. Hawkeye Viper 1-1. Request immediate guidance. The Iraqi aircraft is losing altitude and appears to be in immediate danger of crashing. Thorne's transmission carried the urgency of someone watching a situation spiral beyond anyone's control. The controller's response came quickly, but it carried the frustration of someone dealing with higher authorities who were apparently having difficulty reaching a decision. Viper 1-1, maintain current position. Higher authority is still evaluating the situation. Meanwhile, Al-Rashid's voice continued to crackle through the radio, becoming more desperate with each transmission. American Navy, I cannot maintain altitude much longer. My engine is failing and I must eject soon. The intelligence I carry cannot fall into Iranian hands. Please, you must help me reach American territory. Morrison keyed his microphone, his voice carrying the tension that was building in all of them. Boss, if this guy ejects, we're going to have an Iraqi colonel floating around in the Gulf with what he claims is nuclear intelligence. The Iranians are going to be looking for him, and so are probably half a dozen other interested parties. The tactical situation was becoming impossibly complex. If al-Rashid ejected in international waters, he would become a person in distress, entitled to rescue under international law regardless of his nationality or the intelligence he claimed to carry. But if his defection was genuine, allowing him to be picked up by Iranian or other hostile forces could compromise vital intelligence about nuclear weapons. If his defection was a deception, rescuing him could expose American operations to penetration or manipulation. Viper 1-1, this is Hawkeye. We're being advised that you are not, repeat not, authorized to provide direct assistance to the Iraqi aircraft. Maintain surveillance but do not render aid. The controller's voice carried the careful neutrality of someone relaying orders that everyone knew were inadequate for the situation at hand. Thorne felt her jaw tighten as she processed the implications of those orders. From a legal and diplomatic standpoint, they made perfect sense. Al-Rashid's defection could not be officially acknowledged without authorization from the highest levels of government. But from a human standpoint, they were being ordered to watch a potentially valuable ally crash into the Persian Gulf while carrying intelligence that could prevent a nuclear war. Understood, Hawkeye. Viper 11 will maintain surveillance. Her acknowledgement was professionally neutral, but inside her helmet, her mind was racing through possibilities and consequences. Orders were orders, but sometimes orders were insufficient for the moral complexity of real-world situations. Al-Rashid's F-16 was noticeably lower now, perhaps 20,000 feet and descending steadily. The smoke trail had become a thin black line against the morning sky, and his radio transmissions were becoming increasingly urgent. American Navy, I am losing engine power rapidly. I will be forced to eject in approximately 5 minutes. Please, the information I carry could save thousands of lives. The words thousands of lives hit Thorne like a physical blow. Whether Al-Rashid was telling the truth or lying, the possibility that he was carrying intelligence about an imminent nuclear test created a moral obligation that transcended standard operating procedures. The morning sky that had seemed so clear was becoming clouded with impossible choices. "Blackbird, we've got another problem," Morrison's voice cut through her thoughts. "I'm picking up radar contacts bearing 160, range approximately 40 nautical miles and closing. Looks like Iranian aircraft launching from Bandar Abbas." The tactical situation had just become exponentially more complicated. Iranian fighters launching from their nearest major air base suggested that Tehran was well aware of al-Rashid's flight and was moving to intercept him before he could reach American protection. The peaceful morning sky was about to become a contested battle space, with the 4 American pilots caught between their orders, their conscience, and an approaching enemy force. How many contacts? Thorne's voice carried the calm professionalism that had made her one of the Navy's most trusted fighter pilots, but her mind was already calculating intercept times, fuel states, and tactical options. Initial count shows 4 aircraft, possibly F-14 Tomcats. They're going to reach al-Rashid's position before he reaches American-controlled airspace. Morrison's voice carried the grim recognition that the situation was about to become a race between competing forces, with potentially vital intelligence hanging in the balance. Al-Rashid's voice came across the radio again, tinged now with the desperation of someone who could see his options disappearing. "American Navy, I have Iranian fighters approaching from the south. They will shoot me down before I can reach safety. You are my only hope." The moral complexity of the situation was becoming unbearable. Official orders prohibited providing direct assistance to al-Rashid, but allowing him to be shot down by Iranian fighters would not only cost a human life, but could also result in the loss of intelligence that might prevent a nuclear war. The morning sky that had started the day clear and peaceful was becoming the stage for a confrontation between duty and conscience that no training had ever anticipated. Hawkeye, Viper 1-1. We have Iranian fighters launching from Bandar Abbas, estimate 4 F-14s, bearing 160, range 35 nautical miles. They appear to be on an intercept course for the Iraqi aircraft. Thorne's transmission was professionally calm, but she could feel the weight of command responsibility settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. The controller's response carried the tension of someone who was dealing with a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond anyone's control. Viper 1-1 maintained surveillance of both Iranian and Iraqi aircraft. You are not authorized to engage unless directly threatened. Not authorized to engage. The phrase carried the weight of international law, diplomatic protocol, and chain of command authority. But it also carried the moral burden of watching a potentially valuable ally be shot down while carrying intelligence that could prevent thousands of deaths. Lieutenant Commander Cassandra Blackbird Thorne was about to discover that sometimes the greatest courage requires the willingness to choose between following orders and following conscience when those two imperatives become mutually exclusive. The Persian Gulf stretched beneath them like destiny itself, beautiful and terrible in its indifference to human conflict. Above them, the morning sky seemed infinite, offering no easy answers for the very human problem that was unfolding at multiple altitudes above its peaceful surface. 4 American pilots, 1 Iraqi defector, and 4 Iranian interceptors were converging on a point in space and time that would challenge everything they believed about duty, honor, and the price of making moral choices when those choices carry consequences that extend far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Al-Rashid's F-16 continued to lose altitude, the smoke trail becoming more pronounced with each passing second. The Iranian fighters were closing from the south, their radar signatures growing stronger on the Americans' displays. Time was running out for everyone involved, and the next few minutes would determine not only who lived and who died, but potentially whether vital intelligence about nuclear weapons would reach the people who could act on it or be lost forever in the depths of the Persian Gulf. The countdown had reached its final phase. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test every principle these pilots had sworn to uphold, and the morning sky that had seemed so peaceful was about to become the backdrop for decisions that would echo through the halls of power and the consciences of everyone involved. Viper Flight, this is Al-Rashid. I am beginning final descent. Engine failure is imminent. I must tell you, The intelligence I carry concerns Iranian nuclear test scheduled for tomorrow morning. If this information does not reach your government, Israel will launch preemptive strike based on incomplete intelligence. This could trigger regional war. His transmission carried the weight of someone making what might be his final communication. The words hit the four American pilots like lightning. An Iranian nuclear test scheduled for tomorrow, combined with the possibility of an Israeli preemptive strike based on incomplete intelligence, created a scenario that could indeed trigger the regional war that everyone had been trying to prevent. Whether al-Rashid was telling the truth or perpetrating an elaborate deception, the stakes had just escalated beyond anything any of them had imagined possible. Morrison's voice cut through the silence that followed al-Rashid's transmission. "Boss, Iranian fighters are now bearing 158, range 20 nautical miles. They're going to reach him in approximately 8 minutes." 8 minutes. The number hung in the air like a countdown to catastrophe. In 8 minutes, Iranian fighters would reach al-Rashid's position. In perhaps 10 minutes, his aircraft would suffer complete engine failure, forcing him to eject into the Persian Gulf. The convergence of these timelines created a crisis that demanded immediate action, but the only actions available were ones that would violate direct orders and potentially trigger an international incident. Hawkeye, Viper 1-1. Request immediate guidance. The tactical situation is becoming untenable. Thorne's transmission carried the careful professionalism of someone who was trying to communicate the gravity of the situation without directly challenging the orders she had been given. The controller's response came after a pause that suggested he was dealing with higher authorities who were having difficulty reaching decisions quickly enough to keep pace with events. Viper 1-1, your orders remain unchanged. Maintain surveillance but do not engage unless directly threatened. Orders that had seemed reasonable when this intercept began were becoming impossible to execute as the moral complexity of the situation became apparent. Thorne found herself facing the kind of decision that military academies discuss in ethics classes, but that real pilots hope never to encounter in actual operations. The morning sky that had seemed so clear was becoming clouded with impossible choices, each of which carried consequences that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Al-Rashid's aircraft was now visibly struggling, the smoke trail becoming thicker and his flight path increasingly erratic. His altitude had dropped to 15,000 feet and was continuing to decrease as his damaged engine lost power. Whether he was a genuine defector carrying vital intelligence or an elaborate deception designed to compromise American operations, one thing was becoming increasingly clear. He was running out of time and options. American Navy, I must eject in approximately 5 minutes. I will transmit intelligence data on this frequency before ejection. Please record this transmission for your government. Al-Rashid's voice carried the desperation of someone making final preparations for what might be his last act. The prospect of nuclear intelligence being transmitted over an open radio frequency created security implications that made everyone involved uncomfortable. If al-Rashid was genuine, such a transmission could compromise the intelligence value of his information. If he was a deception, such a transmission could be designed to feed false information to American intelligence agencies. Either way, the tactical situation was becoming impossibly complex. Blackbird, we need to make a decision here. Morrison's voice carried the trust of a wingman who had flown with her through combat, but also the recognition that they were facing a situation that no amount of training had prepared them for. Those Iranian fighters are going to be here in 6 minutes, and this guy is going to be in the water in 5. Thorne studied the tactical display, watching the convergence of forces that was about to play out in the skies above the Persian Gulf. 4 American fighters bound by orders that prohibited direct action. 1 Iraqi defector claiming to carry vital intelligence about nuclear weapons. 4 Iranian interceptors closing rapidly from the south. The mathematics of the situation were simple, but the moral calculus was impossibly complex. "I know," she replied, her voice carrying the weight of someone who was beginning to understand that sometimes the right choice requires the courage to accept consequences that extend far beyond personal career considerations. "But whatever we do, we're going to have to live with it for the rest of our lives." The Persian Gulf stretched beneath them like a vast blue mirror, reflecting the morning sky and offering no guidance for the very human problem that was unfolding above its surface. In 4 minutes, Lieutenant Commander Cassandra Blackbird Thorne would make a decision that would define not only her career, but her understanding of what it truly means to serve with honor when honor conflicts with orders. The countdown continued, measured in heartbeats and radio transmissions, in the distance between aircraft and the growing certainty that everything about this morning was about to change in ways that none of them could predict or control. The morning sky held its breath, waiting for the moment when conscience would demand choices that no manual had ever anticipated. Viper 1-1, this is Al-Rashid. Beginning intelligence transmission now. Please record. Iranian nuclear test site coordinates. 32 degrees 15 minutes north, 48 degrees 47 minutes east. Test scheduled for 0600 local time tomorrow. Yield estimated 20 kilotons. Israeli intelligence believes test imminent but lacks precise timing. Preemptive strike planned for tonight unless they receive accurate timeline. His transmission was clear and precise, delivered with the urgency of someone who understood that this might be his only opportunity to relay vital information. The coordinates he provided placed the test site in a remote area of southeastern Iran, far from major population centers, but close enough to sensitive infrastructure to cause significant environmental and political damage. More importantly, the timing information suggested that Israeli intelligence was operating on incomplete data that could trigger a military response hours before it was actually necessary. Morrison's voice cut through the silence that followed al-Rashid's transmission. "Boss, Iranian fighters bearing 155, range 12 nautical miles. They're accelerating and it looks like they're arming weapon systems." The tactical situation was reaching its crisis point. Iranian fighters were approaching with apparent hostile intent, while al-Rashid's aircraft continued to lose altitude and power. The intelligence he had just transmitted, if genuine, represented information that could prevent a regional war. If it was false, it could be designed to trigger exactly the kind of military response that everyone was trying to avoid. Hawkeye, Viper 1-1. Iranian fighters appear to be adopting attack formation. Request permission to maneuver in defense of Iraqi aircraft. Thorne's transmission was carefully worded to request authorization for defensive action rather than offensive engagement, but everyone involved understood the distinction was largely semantic. The pause before the controller's response suggested intense discussion at higher levels of command. When the response finally came, it carried the frustration of someone dealing with a situation that was moving faster than bureaucratic decision-making processes could handle. Viper 1-1. You are authorized to maneuver defensively, but not to fire unless fired upon. Permission to maneuver defensively was better than no permission at all, but it still left Thorne in an impossible position. Al-Rashid's aircraft was clearly in distress and would be defenseless against Iranian fighters. Allowing him to be shot down while carrying what might be vital intelligence about nuclear weapons would violate every principle she believed in. But taking offensive action could trigger an international incident that might be exactly what her enemies wanted. Al-Rashid's voice came across the radio again, strained now with the effort of maintaining control of his failing aircraft. "American Navy, my engine is completely failed. I must eject in 60 seconds. I repeat, Iranian nuclear test tomorrow morning, 0600 local time. Israeli strike tonight unless they receive this information." 60 seconds. The number hit everyone like a physical blow. In 60 seconds, al-Rashid would be forced to eject, leaving him defenseless in the water while Iranian fighters approached his position. The intelligence he claimed to carry would be lost forever unless someone acted to protect him. But any such action would violate direct orders and potentially trigger consequences that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Viper flight, Iranian fighters bearing 152, range 8 nautical miles. They've locked onto the Iraqi aircraft. Morrison's voice carry.